I start with a reading. It's excerpts from Thank God for Evolution by Michael Dowd. Michael Dowd is an evolutionary evangelist, and he writes about the role of cooperation in evolution. He summarizes it this way. Cooperative, synergy, and competitive strife are the yin and yang of biological evolution. Dowd takes issue with our tendency to simplify evolution as survival of the fittest. He quotes system scientist Peter A. Corning, who writes, quote, ecological communities are not simply gladiator fields dominated by deadly competition. They are networks of interdependent self-interests that require mutual adjustment and accommodation. The necessity for competition is only one half of a duality, the other half of which includes many opportunities for mutually beneficial cooperation. Dowd explains that while few biologists today would deny that competition and strife play vital roles in evolutionary emergence, some conclude that the cooperative processes are equally or even more important. From this perspective, evolution is driven by survival of those that fit best into the web of ecological relationships. As in the situation with the lucky little seaweed and the fungus in our story this morning, Dowd believes that symbiosis, beneficial partnerships, shape ecologies all over the world. We are reminded that competition and strife may indeed create the circumstances that make cooperation advisable. Still, whatever the reason, there are opportunities for cooperation. This was true in our evolutionary history and in our human history. Dowd points out, for our human ancestors, cooperation existed only in small family groups. Cooperative organizations expanded to produce multi-family bands, and then tribes, then agricultural villages, cities, empires, and then nation states. And now some forms of economic and social cooperation span the globe. Here ends the reading. So the question before us this morning is this: are we, individually and collectively, as smart as seaweed? Or for that matter, fungus? When we are thrown up on a new shore, what do we do? When the very foundations of our world shift and we are rocked to the core, what's next? I would like to think that we would cope at least as well as the little seaweed did when the Earth's upheaval left it high and dry. But I have learned long ago the difference between what I would like to think and reality. Perhaps this is the basis of evolution, that it's not guaranteed. Things do not always go as I or you or we think they should. For every little seaweed that merged with a fungus to go on and do great things, there were countless others that withered away on barren rocks. We like the success stories. Those are the ones we tell. The beginning of life on land. How exciting. But this is not a simple story. It was not inevitable. It was a story with many elements. It had adversity. It had cataclysmic events. There was luck involved. And there was cooperation. In this case, evolution was driven by the survival of those that fit best into the web of ecological relationships. The survival of those who, recognizing the reality around them, were able to play nice in the new sandbox, even if it meant playing with those they once considered enemies. I would like to think that we would cope at least as well as the little seaweed when the Earth's upheaval leaves us high and dry. But I wonder, are we willing to change, to adapt, to take stock of new surroundings and evolve? For me, this raises the question of interdependence, one of our fairly newly articulated UU values. This may be the one easiest for many of us to remember because so many of us were fond of the seventh principle in our previous articulation of who we are. The seventh principle, you may remember, called out our respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. Here's one representation, if we can have that slide. Well, you know the flower probably, right? The 6 values that surround love. Oh, there we go. There's lots of different ways that people have done it. When I was with you in January, we talked about transformation. And today we consider independence, interdependence, which for our purposes is described in the UUA bylaws this way. And that will be the next slide. Here we go. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. With reverence for the great web of life and with humility, we acknowledge our place in it. We covenant to protect Earth and all beings from exploitation. We will create and nurture sustainable relationships of care and respect, mutuality and justice. We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships. It's a pretty tall order. An interdependent web, all existence. This is what we honor. We're talking all of existence here, the parts we understand and the parts we don't. All of existence. And it's a web, an interdependent web. The various parts of the web depend on one another and support one another. Touch one part of it, and the ripples of your action have effects beyond the obvious, beyond the immediate. All of existence, since that moment currently estimated to be 14 billion years ago when our universe began expanding from a pinprick, all of existence has been and is interdependent, evolving together. And here's the thing, we're a part of it. Really think about this. We're not just asked to honor it, we're asked to recognize that we're part of it. We're part of an unfolding universe, just like the seaweed and the fungus. We are in relationship with each other and with a larger web. We depend on the web, and parts of the web depend on us. We support parts of the web, and parts of the web support us. Of course, you say, this is obvious. Intellectually, most of us know this. But emotionally, spiritually, experientially, some of us, maybe not anybody in this room, but some of us sometimes forget. Sometimes some of us live as if it were otherwise. We act as if the universe is built for our entertainment, a giant stage, a sandbox crafted for our pleasure, something we can and should control, something we are on or in rather than something we are part of. Sometimes we do real harm. But we are a part of it, and as the universe evolves, so do we. It can be no other way. If we are as clever as a seaweed and a fungus, then we will keep ourselves appraised of the situation around us. We will reach out and experience the rest of the web, and when needed, we will change and evolve. And sometimes that will mean that we need to learn to cooperate in new ways. Let's look at that word, cooperate, to operate together. Like another useful word, collaborate, co-labor, to labor together. We aren't talking here about just taking another into account. We're not talking about tolerating others or even accepting. We're talking about truly and deeply appreciating what others bring to our relationships, our interdependent relationships. I'm reminded of the school that my daughters attended during middle school. It was based on systems thinking. Everything they did looked at interconnections. Another word for this is interdisciplinary. In this type of learning, if you study bridges, you study the science and math of bridge building. You study the geography of the land and the bridge's effect on people and wildlife. You read literature and poetry about bridges. You look at bridges through the eyes of an artist. A bridge does not exist in isolation. To say one understands bridges, there's so much more we need to experience. It's all connected. Perhaps I was attracted to the school for my children because of my own experiences. I was, as you heard, in my first career, a software engineer. This tells you that I did something with programs that make computers run. But I was a specific type of software engineer. I was a systems engineer. I looked at computers as whole systems. For people who know about such things, I wrote operating systems. For people who don't know about such things, if you push the button on your computer and it started to work, that means my program was working. Later in that career, I worked on device drivers. This means I helped the computer talk to the printer or scanner or fax or whatever. It was my job to help the computer and the device, say a printer, cooperate so that your document would go from the screen onto a piece of paper. Cooperation. After I became a minister, someone asked me, how do you like developing people instead of software? And I knew I had met a person who understood both my old world and my new world. I really like developing people instead of software. I love collaboration. I love encouraging people to cooperate. It's just the way I naturally think about the world. It isn't the only way to think about the world. I know. We need our specialists too, and I'm very grateful for them. But me, I naturally want to look at the big picture and the opportunities for cooperation and collaboration. I remember being in a meeting when I was new at a congregation, not the congregations in Orlando. I just want to not cast any aspersions on them. I asked a question. Now, I can't remember what the question was, but I do remember the answer. Someone told me that there, in that congregation, there were different groups. For example, there were the people who were the social justice people, and there were the religious education people, and there were the arts and music people, and there were the environmental people. What was implied in this comment was that with all these different interests in the congregation, I should not expect the congregation to ever collaborate on a big project. Fascinating. Interestingly, most congregations have people interested in all these things. I mean, this congregation, I know a little bit about you. I know you have social justice people, and I know you have people who enjoy the adult programs and put together your morning forums. And you have arts and music people, and you have people who care deeply about the environment. But if I assigned one interest to each corner of this room and asked you to go to the one corner that fit you, arts and music people, oh no, arts and music people over here, environmental people here, justice people there, right? Adult programs over there. Would you all know which corner to go to? No, many of you would not. I was and am fascinated by the idea of competing clans in a congregation. I just don't buy it. I don't think we divide ourselves up that way. Because I've seen that the way that social justice and environmental concerns overlap, I mean, that's one that definitely speaks to the farm workers situation. But there's also ways that the songs of justice and the arts are used to uplift the quilt, the farm workers quilt, for example, right? Uplifts the issues. And there people in the forums, right? You heard in the forum about the issue, about the people with, right? It's all connected to each other. So I think back to my arrival in that congregation, and I wonder what it is I asked that caused someone to tell me I should not expect all the parts of the congregation to work together. I wonder in part because I think this is a frequent tragedy of our human relations, that we underestimate the potential of what we could do together. in our families, in our neighborhoods, our workplaces, our clubs, missed opportunities abound. I bet together we could come up with a long list of examples. Missed opportunities to connect, to collaborate, to cooperate, missed opportunities to be something together that none of us could be alone. Of course, we will all be drawn to different areas personally, and at times my attention may be pulled here and yours is pulled there, but always there is a larger vision of building the world that we dream about. Too often we work at cross purposes or even worse, against each other, when with just a little creativity, a little cooperation, we could support one another. Interdependence has always been a part of our world, but the news is increasingly highlighting it for us. Our actions are connected and often have unintended consequences. We think about the way that the conveniences of fossil fuel use lead to asthma in children and other vulnerable populations. We think about the way the US war in Iran is impacting not just oil, but food supplies that depend on shipping. We think about the ways that two seemingly different topics in the news are related, and that immigrants are being vilified in part, as an excuse to suppress voting rights for all of us. We touch one thing, and too often there are unintended consequences elsewhere. And, parentheses, sometimes intended consequences. Here in this congregation, I know that different areas of congregational life overlap, sometimes intentionally and sometimes just as a natural part of the way life is together. But can we look for even more ways that we can weave our different interests and strengths into new and wonderful creations that haven't yet been imagined? Interdependence, together, cooperation, collaboration, evolution, more than any of us can be alone. One fabulous thing about such joint endeavors is the wonder and mystery of not knowing exactly how it will all turn out. Evolution is like that. We don't know, we can't know. And this is true in all areas of our lives. So I invite you to reflect for just a moment. Are there any areas where you are cut off from life-giving relationships that could be healed? Where could you look for increased cooperation and collaboration? How can you best support who and what you love? Where is your opportunity for a little evolution? Of course, we know that this congregation has evolved throughout its history, from an informal group of like-minded families gathered in the late 1980s to a formal establishment of a charter and meetings in a women's club to a permanent home of your own. Along the way, your relationship with leadership and professional ministry has shifted and clarified. At each point, courageous people made bold decisions. They did not always know what would emerge, but so much has. They did not know when they opened those first figurative doors who would find their way inside. They opened them anyway, and they knew they were growing our life-saving tradition. This community is constantly remaking itself, constantly changing, welcoming new people and grieving the loss of beloved friends, allowing itself to live, to evolve, and to move into the unknown. When I think about this topic, I find my mind drawn to the wonderful tradition many of our congregations, and I know this one too, of potluck meals. We never know who exactly will show up or what they will bring. And yet it all comes together into something delicious and nourishing. Usually nourishing. Sometimes everybody brings brownies, but that's okay. It's a feast none of us could have planned, let alone created on our own. This is one of the fabulous things of our joint endeavors. If we trust the wonder and mystery that come from not knowing exactly how it will all turn out. And I know that at any given potluck, we may find seaweed by way of sushi and fungus by way of mushrooms, for those who eat such things, and lots of land plants that resulted from that partnership, and many of the things that have evolved since then, including us. Once, a very long time ago, 430 million years ago to be precise, a seaweed and a fungus met under adverse conditions and began a fruitful partnership. If we are as clever as a seaweed and fungus, then we will keep ourselves apprised of the situation around us. In this congregation, yes, but also in all our relationships and associations. We will reach out and experience the rest of the web. If we are as clever as seaweed and fungus, we will watch for our opportunities for cooperation and collaboration. We will continue to evolve. May it be so.
Please rise as you're able and join me in our closing hymn, number 1064, Blue Boat Home.